Hello and welcome to Gin with Gwynne. I'm Oliver Gwynne, and this is where I give you my off-the-cuff and unrehearsed thoughts on marketing, data, and philosophy. Now, it's a new year, and if you would like to have a chat with me, you can. There's only two rules. One, I don't send you any questions ahead of time, and two, I don't do any editing at all. So it's a nice, natural conversation between us with no filtering. With that being said, let's get on with it. Now, it's a new year, 2026, and I can say with 100% certainty that absolutely nothing bad will happen to any of us this year. Guaranteed. If only there was a way that we could predict the future like Cassandra, but unlike Cassandra, we could tell people what was going to happen and then plan ahead of it. This week, I'm talking about MRR, which makes me sound like a seal for some reason, monthly recurring revenue forecasting. Now, MRR forecasting, the first thing I wanted to say about this is it's not one number. If you are only presenting one number in your forecasting, then you've gone very, very wrong, because that is a false prediction, basically. It's about building an analytical framework that connects strategic decisions around what you should be building, what you should be marketing, what talent you should be hiring, and reflecting that to revenue outcomes. And it's very, very important, in particular, to investors. Obviously, investors love anything with a subscription or recurring revenue play, and forecast quality directly affects your valuation. So, presenting a single number and hoping that nobody questions it is a lack of sophistication or a lack of confidence in your projections and probably won't stand up to scrutiny. It's something I hear from our investor partners all the time. So, what kind of models can you make? The most simple is linear growth models. Wouldn't it be lovely if everything was linear in life and it just went all the time? And that if you had two customers this year, next year you'll have four, and the next year after that you'll have six, and everything was straightforward like that. It's the simplest thing to do, and sometimes a simple thing to start with is a good way of looking at things. But moving on from that, moving average models. So those smooth out monthly sort of volatility by averaging recent periods and then predicting the future. Next would be cohort-based forecasting. So a bit more sophisticated here. Cohorts, I'm thinking of time-based cohorts here. So all the people who came in January, what is their lifetime value going to be, and how will that affect revenue over time? All the people who came in March, what will their lifetime be, and all of that kind of things. So how do they behave over time? How does that affect revenue? Similarly, but different segment-based forecasting. So if cohorts is based on time, segment might be based on what you are selling or the profile of your user. It could be that you're selling to families versus selling to couples, and those two people will behave differently and they'll spend differently. It could be that you're selling to enterprise customers and that they will retain and expand differently to small businesses. So segment-based forecasting is another way of looking at things. The next, and I think the one that I get asked most about, is driver-based models. It's probably one of the more complicated ones, but I think it's the thing that everybody kind of wants. So instead of predicting like MRR, I'm laughing every time I say that now, directly, you predict the drivers of what makes the number bigger or a difference. So if you increase marketing spend and website graphic traffic grows by 30%, if you improve onboarding and trial conversion increases by 15 to 18%, what does that do to the bottom line? And that can be, it can be a little bit spurious, to be honest, because you never know. But it's a good thing to justify investment. So if you know that you can have a 3% improvement on the conversion rates, and that doing so might cost you 100 hours of development time to improve your onboarding flow, then you can say, okay, is that going to make more money than what we need to invest to do that? And if you are skeptical about the outcomes, I would say, then normally that's a good way of predicting things. So driver-based models, if you have a level of sophistication, you can see if you invest in one side of the business, how it will affect the other side of the business, and so on and so forth. And then the last but most obvious one, the most complicated one, is predictive models using machine learning. Now, we'd all like to think that machine learning is easy now and ChatGPT can do it, but it's very, very complicated. It's all about feature engineering, understanding what drives the future, basically. And nobody knows the future. And so I would start with these other models to begin with. I would start with something that is easy to get your head around and then move on to predictive models when you've got the team in place to really drive those. So where do you start? I think you start in the past because the past predicts the future. in most cases. Isn't that the thing with a lot of these historical predictions that come true in the future? Really, they're telling you the past and then just giving a future day. So, historical trend analysis can examine how metrics have evolved over extended periods, quarters, years, rather than months. And that can give you a good indication of what's realistic. Even though there will have been disruption a few years ago with COVID, you can still see in the last couple of years the general behavior that different cohorts and different trends and different segments have had. Expansion rate trends also reveal whether your product naturally drives increasing customer value or whether expansion requires active selling, which is different because active selling involves costs. Another thing to have a look at, and maybe a good place to start, is just understanding your seasonality. So, again, this is historical data to try and see the future. And if you see that you have peaks and troughs, as we all do throughout the year, then that can help you to predict your cash flow over the coming year. And last but not least, obviously, I love a bit of segmentation. So if you divide everybody up by messaging lines, so what are you selling? What's the messaging around that? And you have a nice cohort in your CRM, then you can look at what they've spent. And that's all about how two sets of data really. One is, do you have segments in place and are they dynamic and not just set lists that age and get worse over time? Two, do you have product usage? Do you have money usage on a user level? Can you mix those two things up to see what are people doing and how are they spending? Because those two things are not always relative. It's not always the case that somebody does more and therefore they're going to spend more money. We all know that to be true, but I think it is a bit of an assumption in most subscription businesses that I see. And why is this important? As I said, hiring decisions depend fundamentally on revenue forecast, investment decisions, pricing strategy decisions. So they can benefit enormously from forecast modeling that can project the revenue impact on different pricing and pricing. Should you increase his pricing by 15%? Okay, maybe you can even start to think about the wider world, which is more difficult. But if you know generally that this year is going to be more difficult for your industry for whatever reason, if you are affected by the tariffs in America, or you know that you're going to be affected by supply and demand this year, then you know that prices are going to go up, and then some people won't be able to afford that, and so pricing strategy decisions can be decided based on that data. And similarly, product strategy decisions, so which features to build, which customer segments to prioritize, and which use cases to emphasize. Most of those things start with historical data that can be used to then predict the future. The caveat I would have with this, and this is something I've said before, is that when you look at the historical data, often what you find is that rich people have more money and they spend more money, and not every product can pivot to serving that audience, and often they don't represent the bulk of your audience. And so you can look at things in a silo and say this group of customers is worth more than this, but you really have to consider the overall value. If you have 2% of people and you can get an extra £100 out of them, that's great. But you can also have 60,000 people where you can get £1 out of more out of them, and that's going to be worth more money from you. And last but not least, market expansion decisions. So entering new geographies is always fraught with problems and costs. Targeting new industries, launching new product lines represent really high stakes strategic decisions. And often you don't have the data because it's a new thing. And so you can only look at how much did it cost you last time to launch into a new place. Maybe you do something small and you use that as a use case to collect the data, and then you make sure that you make decisions based on that. And so when we think about MRR forecasting, we're not thinking of one number, we're thinking of a system of analytical frameworks where it tracks the uplift across different cohorts and across different segments, and you start to understand the decisions that will affect different people. The thing that you are probably missing, so most people have really good financial data. They have pretty good product data most of the time, although it can be expensive because, if I'm clicking a million times on your website or whatever, and you want to track every single time I'm doing something, then that's going to be expensive. But where they tend to lack, in my experience, is they don't have in the same infrastructure robust cost analysis. So, how much does your staff cost? How much does it cost to customer service and all that kind of stuff? Because that can really add up at the end. And so that's a part of the picture that a lot of people don't have robust data on. And so they launch a new product, which if it's successful, maybe it gets 1,000 people in, but they don't realize, oh crap, we need to suddenly hire 10 more people. Or if we don't do that ahead of time, then maybe the 10 people we've got are going to burn out, and then that's not going to be good. We're going to lose all this knowledge in the business, all of those kind of things. Everything has a cost, not just in terms of money, but in terms of the decisions that you want to make in life and, of course, in business. And so it's important to try and get some numbers about the operational cost of delivering something, and not underestimate the fact that when you go to market, it can often take 3 to 6 months to establish a new service. You can't just put a few things out on LinkedIn and hope for the best. So this has been my off the cuff thoughts on MRR, forecasting, and how important it is to the future. If you've got any questions, be sure to get in touch. And if you want to be on the show, the link is down below. Thanks very much for watching. Tune in next time for another Gin with Gwynne.